Hello, A Push Prep class. Welcome to review video number 1. My main goal in these review videos is to track American history in sort of a fast-paced motion from the beginning to the end. And today we are going to look at something that predates American history, but we must learn this so when it comes to American history, we are ready with the context of it. So, I am going off of AP US History notes from studynotes.org. These folks are the best at outlaying the big key moments of US history, and so I want to review them with you. There's a whole material list on Google Classroom that has all of the notes. Just look for lesson outline. The assignment will say the material item would say outline number 1, discovery and settlement of the New World. So, these videos will take 30 to 50 minutes to complete. I read, I break down, I share some insight, I explain what they are saying. So if you're interested, continue watching these videos as I post them. So, we're starting way back in the New World right now. So, the first Americans came from Asia, beginning as early as 30,000 years ago, over a land bridge that formed at the Bering Strait during the Ice Age. The new immigrants were hunters and gatherers, and over a period of 15,000 years, various groups spread over the American continents. By the time of the European discovery of the New World, there were perhaps as many as 100 million Native Americans, the vast majority living in Central and South America. So that's one big myth that APUSH knocks out of the gate. When you get to APUSH, it knocks out the whatever thought you may have that Christopher Columbus and the Europeans actually discovered America. The first inhabitants that historians know about is the group that came from Asia over the Bering Strait, that's between Alaska and Russia, present day. The development of agriculture by Native Americans more than 5,000 years ago sparked new cultures and innovations. Hunters who previously roamed the land like nomads established permanent villages. Corn, sun, and water became focal points for many societies, and played strong roles in religious ceremonies. In some cultures, control of the corn surplus was directly linked to power and authority. So this is basically saying that some of these innovations by Native Americans were kind of advanced for their time period, and they were relied heavily on this agricultural push. Some of the first sedentary societies of North America were created by groups known as the Mound Builders, believed to be ancestors of the Creeks, Choctaws, and Natchez. The mound building society formed enormous earthworks into various shapes and sizes. Some mounds featured multiple terrace levels on which hundreds of horses were built. The largest known mound had a base that covered nearly 15 acres and rose to a height of 100 feet. White circles, squares, and octagons were the most common mound shapes. Some patterns resembled creatures such as hawks, panthers, or snakes. Many believed that the different shapes were religious signs or territorial markers for different tribes. So these Native Americans were famous for mound building, right? I've actually saw through my travels of the southern states, I've seen a lot of mounds built by the Natchez and Choctaw Indians, and they are sophisticated. The Mississippian culture flourished builders after the mound builders expanded their settlements and trading networks. So they were building mounds and expanding their global trade network. They also built massive mounds that served as burial and ceremonial sites. As these peoples became more proficient at farming and fishing, they remained longer in one location and developed substantial dwellings. Clusters of mound builders settled in the Ohio Valley along the Mississippi River and as far west as present-day Oklahoma. In the Rio Grande Valley, the Pebbleo people created complex irrigation systems of water to water their cornfields. The Anasazi's, or Ancient Ones in the Navajo language, carved into the sandstone cliffs, complete cities with baked mud structures that towered 4 or 5 stories high. They developed row upon row of terrace gardens that they used for planting crops. So all this is to say how sophisticated these Indians, these early Americans, these Native Americans were. In what is now the northeastern United States, the Iroquois Confederacy, comprised of 5 Indian tribes: the Seneca, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, and the Mohawk, also relied on agriculture to multiply and prosper. Farming allowed the people to accumulate large quantities of food that could be stored for long periods. This helped to decrease the threat of starvation, especially during the winter, and ultimately led to population growth, since more food was available and more hands were needed to cultivate and harvest the crops. So farming was was a big deal to the Native Americans. Many Native Americans king groups developed sophisticated planting techniques that allowed them to take full advantage of the land and make the most out of the time and effort they put into their agricultural work. One of the more unique procedures, called Three Sister farming, involved a high-yielding strain, a bean that grew on the corn stalks while squash grew at the base of the plant to help retain moisture in the soil. This procedure allowed farmers, who were usually the females of the tribe, to harvest 3 different crops from the same field. These crops became an important commodity as farmers traded portions of their harvest to hunters for animal furs, bones, and meat. So they used their harvests and their agricultural to trade as currency. The Iroquois League of Five Nations was the largest political and military organization east of the Mississippi River. However, even as North American civilizations grew in population, sophistication, and power, they did not compare to the complex societies of the Aztecs and Incas in Central and South America. These vast empires included paved roadways and canals that linked smaller cities, aqueducts that carried fresh water to urban pools and fountains, and giant pyramids that rivaled in grandeur they found in Egypt. The Aztecs settled on the site of present-day Mexico City in the early 14th century. Although they might be considered latecomers to the area, their political skills and military strength enabled them to expand beyond their capital city of Tenochtitlan very quickly. While they used their military might to conquer several regions, Aztec leaders also formed alliances with many groups already established in the area. They convinced them to serve the empire rather than risk bloodshed and war. So they were influencing them to join our great and powerful and mighty empire instead of going to war with them. Food, baskets, household goods, precious metals, and even prisoners for human sacrifices were given to the rulers in the capital city. The empire grew rapidly as more and more subjects paid tribute to the Aztecs. So they grew their subjects. They had a lot of, of subjects that they could use. In South America, where the climate varies from cold mountain peaks to steamy rainforest, the Incas ruled much of the western coast. So the Incas had ruled western coast of South America. Perhaps more than 12 million people contributed to the creation of sprawling cities, terraced farmlands, expanded railroads, and golden palaces. The Inca Empire covered nearly 2,500 miles and included regions of present-day Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Argentina. Although, like other native peoples throughout the Americas, they did not have their own written language or the use of the wheel. The Incas were extremely intelligent engineers. They built huge stone structures without mortar and designed suspension bridges that crossed deep mountain valleys. Their well-organized political structure and close-knit hierarchical society enabled the Incas to become the largest civilization in South America in 1500. Like that of the Aztec Empire, the Inca Empire was essentially a coalition of tribes. However, unlike the strong-handled rule of Central American culture, the Incas allowed local groups to govern regions independently. Each tribe gave its allegiance to the ruler, the Sapa Inca, whom they believed was the descendant of the sun god. In return for their cooperation, the people were treated well and accepted into the paternalistic Incan society. The majority of the Native Americans that inhabited South and North America respected their land and often paid tribute to gods to bring them bountiful harvest and production. However, little did they know that their way of life would change drastically once European explorers set foot on the Americans' continent. Okay, I'll have to do a part 2 on this one because I want to cover Christopher Columbus in a separate video. So stay tuned for the part 2 of this video.